I suppose your perspective of as a son on the importance of being a family, how has it affected you as a son having raised two parents, and I suppose my just reflection of how it is fathering and just the responsibility, the work that it takes, the joy that it has, you know.
Yeah.
But just I think the overarching theme is how in today's day and age, it's not important anymore. It's like we talked about earlier, more
Yeah.
of a burden than as a, blessing, and people are choosing careers over families, and
Yep. Well,
so
it's where we live in such a self-centered society. So if everything's not about
right,
them, it's not worth it, their time.
right. And so why that's so, I don't want to say it is wrong, but why it's so, that's why there's that statistic that I found out, it says like if the average Christian, even Christian home, the average Christian has 1.5 kids.
Yep.
And it said by like the year 2055 or
Yeah.
2050 or something like that, it said that will Christianity right out of existence.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, we're actually
because
dying
we're not
faster
leaving,
than we're reproducing right now. So,
yeah, yeah, we're not leaving legacies. We're leaving careers, but we're not leaving legacies. So, but
and then
so I
we could,
mean, that
good.
go ahead.
Well, then we
More
could.
amp.
The good question is, why is that? Do you think? Uh, I mean, obviously, like we kind of said already, everybody's only worried about themselves. But it also almost seems like popular culture is saying having a family is bad. Like having kids is such a terrible thing. Like all
Yeah.
the, and so it's almost like some there's something about the family that the enemy is scared of, so he's pushing us away from it. I mean, he has been
Right.
since frickin' the '60s and '70s, or '50s, '60s, and '70s.
He
So
has
it's
he has from the first couple.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm saying like in our time or in our what we can remember, and obviously I can't even really remember that, but looking through our history books, like family was most like one of the most important things. That's one of
Right.
that's one of the main reasons why the founders of this country delegated like the most power to the smallest uh, areas. So like the cities have the most power, not necessarily the federal government over like day to day life. Like everything kept coming down
Right.
and down and down, and so
I think a big part of that is because I think you and I talked about a little bit, but like there's some things that we can step into next time. But um, I think I think our culture is trying to become devoid of responsibility.
yeah,
Anything that's going to take work, or anything that's going to demand responsibility, we don't want, and that's why
yeah,
everything's so. You get everything you want so quick. It's just everything's so easy, and that's what we live our life by. Whatever we can do to make our life easier,
yep,
and working from home, which is just so against the nature of human beings to be alone every day, all the time in front of the screen. That's just against the very nature of how we're designed.
yep.
But it's easy. It's easy to wake up in the morning, put on your pajama pants, a good and work from home. Um, so I think that's a huge part of why the family unit is falling apart, is it because why? You know?
Yeah.
Like we said before, that's the question of why would I want to bring a kid to such a screwed up world, Um, but the opposite of that is, well, if we don't bring any kids and raise them up right in a screwed up world, it's always going to be screwed up,
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's
but
what.
many people don't see it that way.
Oh yeah. And then that's a going back, kind of going back to what you said. I don't even know if it was our first talk. I think it might have been one of our last phone calls. But you're saying how like um, the 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 season slash like the phase that you feel like you're in more so is you're not necessarily on the front lines of battle, like you're not in attack mode, such you shouldn't be.
Right, right,
But then, and I, at first, my first instinct with that being that I'm in a different season and then I'm in a different like area, I was like, well, no, we have to be on attack. Like, look at all the ground we've already lost because we haven't been on attack. But then I thought about it more, and I was like, well, not everybody can be attacking. Somebody's got to be devising
right,
strategy, advising, and
right,
then um,
right.
um, I'm listening to a series right now, and he's talking about the different generations and like uh, what he feels like their calling is for each generation. It almost lined up exactly like that.
Mm,
Like there's different ages that have different responsibilities to the world, to themselves, to the younger ages, etc. I think that's very true of right
right,
now because yeah, you could have a bunch of wild attackers just killing everything in their path, but it's like, well, you shouldn't have killed that. You shouldn't have torn that down. You should have modified that. You know what I mean? You can have that
right.
crazy Irishman from Braveheart, or you can have a
Yeah,
guy like Braveheart that strategizes, or not Braveheart, but William Wallace that strategizes and then puts to use the crazy guy in his place.
yeah, yeah. Well, the very thought that you need them both.
No, oh yeah, oh 100%, yeah, yeah,
You need them both. You need the person that's making the calls and strategizing, and you need the crazy guy that's going to go out and carry out the strategy.
yeah,
You know, uh, so and when you think about it, when it comes to family, what's interesting is when I read a book many years ago, Carrie, your mom knew the author, and he used to go to tribes in Africa, and that were these remote tribes in Africa, and that he would stay with them for like 60, 90 days, or whatever, just to kind of reflect on his own life. And uh, he said that the kids would always try to sneak in and listen to the elders of these tribes because they wanted to gain the wisdom that they had,
mm-hmm,
and because they valued it, it was important, and they were each each kid that's born in these tribes, the moment they're born, they're on a cycle of becoming men. They're on a cycle of becoming woman, and right off the bat, they're being trained by the elders, by the parents, you know, because they know one day they're going to have to be a leader of one of these tribes.
yeah,
And he asked the leader. He goes, the leader said, "Well, you guys." The leader said, "Well, you guys have technology, so you guys should be able to train anybody." And he's like, "Yeah, well, it works opposite actually. What we
yeah,
don't want them to be trained by, they're being trained by.
yeah,
Um, the importance of that, the importance of the child wanting to gain the wisdom of the elders, and the importance of the elders wanting to raise up the child. I
yeah.
mean, that is lost in today's world. Just,
Oh
we
100%.
let TV screens and iPhones and iPads raise our kids, and we wonder why at 5 years old they don't listen to you.
Yeah.
Like,
Or that, or you have somebody else raise them because you're trying to focus on your career. But then also
yeah,
like but then also what's been kind of taught to them too is that your parents and your grandparents were wrong about everything. You're smarter than
yeah,
they are or were. So it's been
yeah,
taught to them at a young age. So they're just sitting there, and so when they grow up, they don't want the knowledge of their grandparents and their parents because they think they're smarter than them.
right, Yeah. The big saying is now, you don't understand me.
Yeah.
You know,
Hmm.
there's no way you can understand. And it's like, no, I think that's opposite. I've lived for 57 years.
Yeah.
You lived 12.
Yeah.
Who should have a little bit more understanding,
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
and there's something to say about, yeah, there's probably nuances that I don't understand. I can
yeah,
never understand about you, and you can never understand about, or my generation can never understand about your generation, and vice versa. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn from one another, especially if
right,
somebody that's
exactly.
older, like especially somebody that's older could be like, hey, I've already walked this path. Maybe
Yeah,
try to stay away from these traps. They may look different now, like there's more
right,
distractions now, sure, but there were always distractions. Back, maybe
right,
back in your
exactly.
days, maybe back when you were a kid, the distraction was a potential distraction was, oh, hey, look, we can rebuild this car. How cool would that be? Would be really freaking cool. Would be a lot of fun, but potentially that's a distraction. Or for me, hey, look, for my generation, hey, look, I could start doing a series on the internet of a video game. Could be, like, it would be really cool. Potentially a distraction. Potentially a really good upside, especially if you're mechanically inclined or if you're technology inclined. Yeah, that could be kind of training you a little bit for something down the road, but it's potentially a distraction.
Well, I guess I think a big part of whether it be a distraction or not is the purpose of you doing it and you being trained by it. You know,
And what? Sorry, you broke up
I mean, if you're
second
if
part.
you're if the purpose that you're the purpose that you're doing it and who you're being trained by.
Okay.
You know, I mean, if it's my son like you, and I'm teaching him how to change the oil of a car, that's not a distraction because you're gaining wisdom.
Yeah. Oh,
You're
yeah. Yeah.
learning. You're learning something about your life. Um, and so I think there's a lot of things. I think there's a lot of things that generations don't learn now because they're not being trained by nothing but the internet, and
Yeah.
so but the one thing that I say whenever I counsel or coach, um, is when they say the things of like, well, you just don't understand. Well, help me to understand.
Yep.
Just because you don't understand each other doesn't mean we got to cancel each other from Facebook and
Yep.
no longer speak to each other. No, help me. I want to learn. I want to know what it's like to go through that or been through that. So help me to understand.
Well, then maybe
Um, and I think
maybe a good question to ask then too is, okay, I mean, this is a little more hard hitting than help me understand, but then it basically, okay, so you just called me stupid. Help me not be stupid. Teach me. I mean,
right.
if we boil it down to something that's more than like, oh, I don't understand. That sounds like help me understand. Sure, that's like that sounds good. Ultimately, what they're saying is you're stupid. Or not, maybe not stupid. You're ignorant to
You're
this.
ignorant, right? You're ignorant in this area, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Well, then help me not. Like, teach me. Um,
Right.
but by
Yeah.
distractions, I guess I more so meant like not being taught by something. I more so meant distractions like when you were a kid, it may have been cool. I know, especially from some stories you've told me, that you like to, take things apart and put them back together just for fun. No one
Right.
necessarily was teaching you that.
Right.
Potentially, I mean, probably there probably was at some point in time, but just when it was just you
Yeah. It
taking
was a lot
apart,
of self.
yes,
Yeah.
and that potentially is a distraction from what could have been, from other things you could have been doing. Potentially, I'm not saying it was or it wasn't. I'm saying
Right.
potentially. Where now playing a game and recording it for some purpose for on the internet. That's potentially a distraction, even if you end up being a millionaire from it, or end up making a bunch of money from it, or whatever it is. It's potentially a distraction.
So, well, how would you know if it was a distraction?
Well, I don't. I
What
wouldn't.
would make something you're doing not a distraction?
I guess I wouldn't. I wouldn't categorize all distractions as bad.
Right.